Hey, my friends. It's me, Davin, and this is another episode of the Becoming Sound podcast. Thanks a bunch for joining me. I'm so grateful for your listening ears and your open hearts, and I want to share with you what I think will be quite a unique episode. I recognize that I keep saying that at the top of every episode, so thanks for hanging with me on this zigzag of a journey. But, when I rebooted the podcast, I made a bit of a promise to myself to try to show up here more authentically and more freely and really just bring to you what felt aligned for me to share. And I want to share today something that feels a bit vulnerable, if I'm being quite honest, but I also think it's something that you might be able to relate to. It's an experience that I've had many times and I'm actually having today. And maybe it's an experience that you've had as well, or if you haven't, maybe one you will have in the future. And so what I'd like to do is I'd like to tell you what's going on with me, tell you what's up, and then I'm going to cut to a conversation that I am going to have with a dear friend of mine who I think is going to be really skillful in helping me synthesize exactly what's unfolding for me, psychologically, spiritually, emotionally, but particularly from the framework of the nervous system and, my embodied experience. Okay, so here's the deal. Last night, I hosted an event here in Chicago, a spring equinox immersive sound healing experience at Epiphany Center for the Arts. It was awesome. It was so beautiful. There was such a beautiful crowd of people. We sold a great number of tickets, and I felt like I did a really good job. And there were a bunch of little funny sort of snafus that happened. I broke a bunch of crystal bowls, which is an expensive mistake. More on that another time. But I still felt good. I felt really great about what happened. It was just an overall really, really pleasing experience. But I'm having this experience today that I've had, like I said, many times before, and it's an experience that I don't have regularly, but I have regularly enough to think about it being sort of an under discussed part of what it means to be a performer or even a creator who is sharing your creativity with the world. And it's pretty much just the come down the day after an event. Or the day after, or the time after putting something out into the world. For me, especially when I have what I would consider to be something like a performance, and now mind you, I've performed my whole life, quite literally, so this isn't something I'm doing for the first time, and last night was amazing. It was a really beautiful experience, but it certainly wasn't one of the largest performances that I've done. But the day after, there's this intense come down. And one of the things that feels frustrating to me about it is that sometimes it feels like it robs me of the joy of the experience. And I also want to go into this conversation saying that I actually know intellectually that what I'm experiencing is quite normal, which is why I want to share it with you. But if I said this to you in quite plain and simple terms, when I do an event like I did last night, I often wake up the next morning sad, down, maybe easily irritated, frustrated about little things. I mean, this morning, so basically this morning, I had this beautiful event last night, and when I get home from the event, I can't sleep usually very well. I'm both exhausted because, when I do an event like this, the setup is hours long. The event itself, when I'm creating these immersive sound healing experiences, I'm literally singing for 75 minutes straight. It's intense. So many hugs afterwards, so much socializing, which is amazing. Then the whole teardown, and I'm a one-man show over here, so I'm doing it all. But then I get home and I'm wired, just like wired. My mind is like has electricity running through it. But even though I'm fatigued, I can't sleep. And so it's this juxtaposition, this paradox of being so exhausted and also unable to sleep. But I finally got to sleep around midnight, and then I woke up at 5 a.m., bright and early, much earlier than I wanted to sleep. So I did get 5 hours of sleep, but not really the amount of sleep that I would have wanted for myself, given how much energy expenditure happened for me yesterday. But I meditated and I had some breakfast and I had a leisurely morning, and eventually I just decided to go for a walk. But when I went for a walk, man, my mind was just really doing some stuff. Again, like, the simplest way to say what I'm experiencing is sadness, um, overwhelm. But when I'm caught in those thoughts, in the moment, I'm ready to burn the whole thing down. Like, I'm like, I can't even describe it because it's not directly correlated to what has an event. It's not directly correlated in terms of the rationale of my mind. Like, I'm not going, last night sucked, last night was terrible, I gotta burn the whole thing down. It's just that my mind starts grabbing at things that it wants to label as terrible. Or just like, my mind is trying to make sense of the fatigue that I'm feeling. And so it starts to convince me that I need to, end commitments or rebuild, like burn the whole thing down and rebuild the whole thing. And, I have enough experience with this, and enough experience in mindfulness and mindful awareness to sort of be able to witness my thoughts and witness what's happening. But the second trap that I quickly fall down, and I wonder if you'll be able to relate to this, is, I'm kind of feeling like shit. And mind you, also, I went for a walk today and it was beautiful. The sun was shining. It was glistening off the lake. I'm coming off this beautiful night. I got so many hugs, so much love, so much affirmation. And, I'm going on a whir about how I need to shut the whole thing down, blah, 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 blah. And then in Buddhism, this is called the second arrow. The second arrow is I start to chastise myself. Well, why are you feeling that way? You just had a beautiful night. Get it together. What is wrong with you? How are you going to be able to handle bigger opportunities if something like this results in you feeling like this the next day? The other way in which this happens for me sometimes when I do gigs is like, the day after a gig, I feel like a vegetable. It's not even in my body. It's not a fatigue in my body. It's like I can't focus on things. I can't have meaningful conversations. It's a very confusing experience, but I think it's really, really normal. I think it's actually a normal part of any sort of, well, I would say large energy expenditure, but particularly around situations where we share creativity. And I think that so many of us imagine that we plan forever and we do this event and it's a big deal, and if it's a success, then we will ride high afterward. And I got to tell you, that is not typically my experience. Now, sometimes it is. It's not always the case that I'm a depressive mess after I perform. But I want to be honest with you and say it is very normal for me the day after I have a big performance show, something like that, to feel sad. Sad is like the simplest way to describe it. And so I've got this friend. Her name is Elise Bessler, and we've known each other for a long time. She's actually been on the podcast before, and she is we met through the somatic voice work world. But she has really, over the last 10 plus years, dug in deep to nervous system regulation, and she's a somatic experiencing practitioner, and she's just a real beautiful voice on this topic and this subject. And so what I want to do is I want to give her a phone call, and we're going to talk about what is going on with me, and I'm going to let her do her best to synthesize this so that we can all learn from her wisdom, but also normalize what transpires in the body, that then sort of makes its way into the heart, mind, and spirit afterward. And yeah, I'm just curious what she has to say, and I hope that you find this conversation to be helpful. So let's give her a call. Okay. You and I have talked about having this type of conversation before, and today just felt like a really good day because I'm having this experience, which is familiar. And I think intellectually what I'm experiencing makes sense to me, but when I'm actually in the thick of it, the lived experience, sort of the emotion of it feels confusing or disconcerting at the time. But essentially, like I told you, I did this event last night. I did this created this immersive sound healing experience here in Chicago, and for all intents and purposes, it was an absolutely beautiful event. Everything went really well. Lots of people sold good tickets. Um, Doing something like that is exhausting for me, between the setup, the actual performance itself, and the teardown. It's a lot of hours of energetic output. So it makes sense to me that I would feel tired the next day. But what often happens to me is I get home from the event. I generally can't sleep well because I'm feeling both fatigued and wired. The adrenaline's still running, but I'm also tired. And so I got an okay amount of sleep last night, but I was just really struck by this morning. When I woke up, I'm just exhausted and in like a heavy way, right? But I'm okay. I have breakfast, I meditate, then I go for a walk. But when I was out on a walk, it's a beautiful day, and at least I'm just sad, right? Like there's just like a sadness that overtakes me, and it's such a specific type of sadness because it doesn't it's not directly correlated. It's not like I'm looking at the event last night and going, that was shit, I'm a failure, I'm a flop. It's not that at all. It actually feels very existential in the moment. It's like, and I know this word a little bit from my understanding of nervous system, but it's a collapse, right? Like I feel collapse. And what's funny is my mind sort of takes off on me, and there are two things that happen. One is I generally find myself wanting to, like, the best way I can describe it is burn the whole thing down. Like that's one of the ideas that comes to mind, is that I'm just supposed to, like, shut it all down and start over. And I don't even know what shut it all down means, but that's one of the ideas that often comes to mind. And then the second thing that happens is sort of the self-chastising of, you just had an amazing night, people loved what you did. What's wrong with you? The sun is shining this morning. You're on a beautiful walk. Why are you, what's wrong? Like, why can't you get it together? Or it even gets more like future focused, and it's like, you how are you going to be able to handle anything else that's bigger than this, so this morning I woke up, I had this experience, and I was just thinking to myself that it's going to be useful today, particularly today, to talk this through with you, because I know you can offer me some perspective on how to understand what's happening in my body and why that would happen with sort of this creative, energetic output.
Mm, yeah. Yeah. And I think you sharing this is so important because name one performer that doesn't experience this, right? I think this is a really, really important conversation. So I heard you say you understand cognitively what's happening. So I'm actually kind of curious about that. Like I'm curious about what what's happening for you or what your understanding of that is.
Well, I think what I'm trying to say is, like, intellectually I can kind of make sense. Like, dude, you had a big event last night. It was lot of energy out. Um, and of course you would be having like, if a friend came to me, and I would contextualize it with them by saying that, like, you gave a lot last night, like a lot happened, like of course you would feel a little down today. I think when I'm caught in the swirl of it, even though I feel pretty successful at witnessing what's happening, it does. I mean, I'd be dishonest if I wasn't saying it doesn't overwhelm me, where I'm like literally the best word I can say is that I just feel sad, and that feels like, it's just the feeling of sadness. It can feel overwhelming. It's not depressed. It's like, yeah.
Totally. Yeah. And when you think about as a performer and as someone for you, like when you do these sound healing experiences, it's not just performing, like you're really holding space for other people's experience as well, right? And there's so much dopamine and cortisol and like all of these, I mean, dopamine's like what they call like the pleasure hormone, right? And it
Yeah.
spikes so much when we're in that performance state. I mean, we can feel it. right? I'm assuming you feel that, like when you're
Oh, I
everything when
love
you're
it. Yeah, I live for it.
and it's such a high, right? Like it's such a high. And it's not just a pleasure chemical though. It's also something that allows us to be motivated. And so if you think about these situations, these experiences that you're having where you're on such a high and you're experiencing so much dopamine, plus the other, like, cortisol, stress hormones, and adrenaline, and all of that running through your system, and then all of a sudden you're not, right?
Right.
And so we get into this like deficit kind of state where all of a sudden we're not experiencing that high. And so it doesn't return back to the baseline, is basically what I'm hearing you say, right? And in this case, especially the day after, it kind of actually dips a little bit below. And that's where we're in that deficit state, um, that we experience, right? And so that collapse in your nervous system, which kind of directs the hormones that are flowing through your body, that collapse in your nervous system is also what happens to dictate those kind of existential thoughts.
Right.
So that collapse state is really where we're kind of in that state of like, oh, what am I doing? You know, why even bother? Like, you're not going to be able to
Totally.
handle this. Like all of these things that show up, they're especially you. Like I know you've got like your mindset game is too wrong. And yet here you are in the situation where it's like you can't control those thoughts, right? And so as a whole, okay, it totally makes sense to me, right? Because you're on these high highs and then all of a sudden you're in this low low. And that collapse state is dictating those low lows.
Yeah, I think like the thing that often frustrates me is that, I'll have these amazing performance experiences and then it'd be lovely the day after to just sort of bask in the glory and the glow of what transpired, but then it does feel like, whoa, it's hard for me to see it clearly or respond to it clearly. Yeah. Because I have this. It's not every time, actually ironically sometimes when I do like a really big event, I feel like the next day is great because the energy sort of propels me forward through. But a mid-size or even a more mundane event, sometimes the come down is even harder the next day.
Yeah. I was going to say too, I heard you mention sort of everything that it takes for you to be involved in the setup. Like this is you setting up, this is you decorating, this is you like ticket sales, like all of the things that are moving forward that is just like a lot of load, right?
Yes, yeah, and it can be like a lot of physical output as well as energetic output too. The physical output aspect of it makes sense to me, but it's hard when you're in that emotional state to connect those dots.
That's exactly it, right? So because it's subconscious, right? This is like survival, what some of my mentors call survival physiology. It's like your
Okay.
body is in that. It's like thinking about conserving energy afterwards because you've put so much energy out that we have to go into energy conservation. And so our higher thinking is it's just like too much. It's too much information, right? It's too much energy. And so we go into that sort of survival state, which
Yeah.
is that sort of collapse state, right? And it's super freaking smart, right? Like if you think about the way our bodies work, it's super smart for our bodies to be able to like hold um that energy that you've ex, expended, and to take care of you in that way and say like, whoa dude, like you actually need rest, or
Hmm.
what have you, right? um so yeah, I just like for anyone who's listening, and also for you and for me, I mean, I think it's a beautiful reminder to say like, oh, there's nothing wrong with you. This is actually
Right.
your system is actually doing what it's supposed to do, which is protect you, right? um but then of course the question is, well, how do we manage this? Because you obviously want to be doing this. This is your career,
Yeah.
right? So how do we manage it? How do we take care of it? And that does happen at the nervous system level. So I think like, actually working with varying kind of like parts of your system can be really helpful to just create a little bit more capacity to hold it um, afterwards, right?
So when you
Um,
say that, say so when you say more capacity to hold it, do you
yeah,
think are you saying in terms of framework of to let what is going to transpire just transpire, or are you saying that it's possible to not come down so hard?
yeah, yeah, both, really, both. And I think like what I was more referring to, and happy to clarify that, it's really more about to be able to hold the largeness of the experience. So the largeness of the performance and then everything that happens around it, so that it's not so much of a jarring kind of experience for your system. Um, and then because of that, that low, or we'll say that kind of dopamine deficit or whatever you want to call it, when it dips, it doesn't dip as low, right? Or it dips and then your system's like, no, we got this, right? And that's what regulation is. It's not that we don't feel stress, it's that we don't let it drive the bus, right? Or it doesn't drive the bus, I shouldn't say, because we don't really have a choice in the matter. Um, but yeah, I don't know. Did that sort of answer your question?
Yeah, yeah. And I will say, like, one of the things that I, you know, am aware of is people who perform and tour a lot and that sort of thing. Like, I totally understand relying upon exterior or external sources
Yeah,
for support,
yeah,
right? Like it's easy to go to food, it's easy to go to any sort of like alcohol or
yeah,
weed or whatever because it does feel like you're just trying to or caffeine honestly. Like I'm like give me all the
yeah,
caffeine the next day because you're
yeah,
trying desperately to get back to some sort of neutral middle ground
yeah.
where things start to feel less dramatic and might make sense.
100%. And excuse me, it's actually, it's why there are such high rates of addiction, in the industry. I
Yeah.
say the industry, the music industry, but really any industry, or any kind of situation where somebody is experiencing these high highs, these dopamine hits. It's like our brain always wants that, right? It's always going to be seeking that hit. And so ideally we can kind of get that happening from our nervous system to our brain so that we can regulate a little bit more through that or move through it with more flexibility basically, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, you really named something there that I think is it's important. And also too, like I said this earlier, um, and the sort of research that's been done around addiction and somatics and nervous system is that again, like a lot of times there's a lot of shame around that, like
Right.
reaching for the weed or reaching for the alcohol or the caffeine. Um, but really like it's actually really smart, right, of your brain and your body to be doing those things to try and help regulate the experience that you're having, right? And again, I'm
Yeah.
not saying that that's like the only answer, but it really is smart. So just like normalizing that for people who might be challenged or struggling with that.
Yeah. And and I even say for me there is and this is where the sort of conversation in my head gets complicated where it's like there's shame in just feeling bad in general after you've had a successful experience. And I guess this is
Yeah,
why I wanted to share this conversation with other people because I actually think it's my experience that this happens often with any sort of large creative output. Like it doesn't even necessarily have to be a performance but just simply sharing something like it could be like
yeah,
you put out a painting to the world or something like that there is often this sort of I think idea that you would have the experience, it would be a success, and then you would just sort of continue to ride high, and everything's an up level from there.
yeah,
But
yeah,
it's my experience that anytime I have sort of a tremendous output, I can feel, again, sort of intellectually proud of what I've accomplished, and I can hear the affirmation from other people. But it's also the case that I have this come down and I will say that it doesn't last. Typically it's like a day, right? Like typically
yeah,
it's the
yeah,
day after that I struggle. It's one of the reasons I actually like when I tour, I like to be on my own. I think it actually would be harder for me to be with other people sometimes like the day after because I just don't have much capacity to give
yeah,
conversationally. That's the other thing too is like the day after a performance, I often can't do basic things. Like, I'll stare at my computer with emails that need to be responded to, and I'm like, I just can't do it, and that is an easy trap to fall down to and start to chastise yourself. It's like, dude, get it together. You got to get that together. And I've done a lot of work to learn how to be kind to myself, but I just want to name it as it is something that I experience regularly. I don't generally speak about because it can seem embarrassing. It's like, you just had a great performance. Like, what's wrong with you? Like, pull it together. But I know that that it's a natural part of, um, this embodied experience of being a creator and a performer and sharing what you do.
Yeah, and what a beautiful gift it is to have this conversation, right? Because I, I may have mentioned, I can't remember if I mentioned this at the beginning, but like how many people aren't talking about this, but are
Right.
experiencing this? Um, and so I wonder, and you can take this or leave it. I always say to folks when we're talking about this stuff, like, I'm going to offer a suggestion, and then you can chuck it in the garbage if it doesn't work for you. But I wonder what it might be like to kind of bake in, and what I mean by bacon is just like include in your performance timing, right? That day afterwards to to give yourself, and I'm going to use the word permission, but I use it lightly. Maybe it's actually a hard boundary where you say, actually, I'm not answering emails today, right?
Yeah.
Like I know that or that your system is in that recovery period. Think of it as, a marathoner, right? Like you wouldn't go run a marathon and then the next day go and like, whatever, play a basketball game or whatever it is. Like you would build in time for recovery. And
Hmm.
so I wonder what that might be like for you to just say, okay, like Thursday, March 19th, I'm not answering emails. I'm going to go for a walk. I know I might feel a little bit blue, but I'm not going to be, working with clients. I'm not going to be doing any of that. Like just to see what your system does with that. Because I also think of that subconscious knowing, like you have to wake
Right. I
up.
have so much shit to do
Yeah.
tomorrow.
Yeah. So then, of course, you're only going to have 5 hours of sleep because you're on this high, and then you're like, oh shit, like I have to work with clients tomorrow, or I have to answer these emails, or
Yeah.
whatever it is, right? So that might be a an initial way to kind of say, okay, no, like there's care that's required here, and that care means that you're not going to overload the system any more than it already is, right?
Yeah.
And then, of course, eventually we're at the point in our careers where we don't have to do the setup and we don't have to do the decorating and all
Right.
that. That can be done by somebody else. But right now, you're the one man show, right? So
Yep.
yeah, yeah,
No, I think that makes a lot of sense. And you know, I think this also relates to a conversation around what self care is because, it'd be easy for me if I'm left to my own devices, like the day after an event, I would just eat a bunch of junk, I would shop, and I would scroll my phone all day. I'm like, oh, I set the day aside. And then, so I have to be vigilant around that too, because I also know that those things don't make me feel better. And it's funny today too, like I'm sort of in a season of my life where I'm exercising some discipline around what I'm eating and some things like that I don't normally do. And so that I think also exacerbates, like I'm not able to rely on some of those less healthy patterns or sources. And so it leaves you more vulnerable. But then the opportunity there is to discover the self-care practices that would actually be more supportive and in a way that would point me toward well-being and sustainable.
I love that you brought that word up. I wonder for all of us if we started calling them self-sustaining practices,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Cool.
Like what is sustaining? What's sustainable? And then there's
Yeah.
less shame, right?
Yeah.
There's less shame, like, oh, I ate that pint of Ben and Jerry's ice cream, or like whatever it is, the bag of
Yeah.
chips, or whatever it is but like, just like self-sustaining, like, and then you, of course, as the performer, as the artist, right? And also what like, fuels your system in a way that feels nourishing.
So if you were to talk about like some maybe just very basic simple ideas around what it would mean to expand your capacity, um like what does that mean, or what could that look like?
Yeah, it's a process. and the beauty in this work, I mean, I see this with clients all the time. I've seen it with my own self as well. The magic in working with your nervous system is actually not in the rescue moments. And what I mean by that is like, oh, I'm having anxiety, so I need a tool. I need to use a tool to help me, you know, kind of mitigate my anxiety. It's not That's not the magic. The magic is in the daily practice. So, 2 minutes here, 4 minutes there, actually working with the wiring of your body to change those patterns of survival, right? I mentioned
Hmm.
earlier survival physiology. Um, all of us have specific deficits in our nervous system. Like for me, I have what's called a vestibular deficit. So when I'm stressed, I get dizzy, and that's because my nerves that feed my balance system in my body are in a deficit. And so I know that if I work with that on a daily basis, when I'm not stressed, that in the moments of stress, those nerves are going to have different firing capabilities, if that makes sense.
Mm.
Right?
Yeah, yeah,
So it sounds really scientific, and it doesn't sound very sexy, and it's kind of like, whoa, it feels like work for a lot of people, but it doesn't take a lot. So yeah, that magic really happens. It's kind of like, with voice, right? It's the same thing. Like, we're not going to use our technique specific or think about our technique when we're on stage. We're going to do the technique outside of the performance so that we can trust our voice on stage, right?
yeah,
It's
right.
similar. It's similar to that.
Yeah, and I think it goes, it's easy to forget. Like for me, it's easy to forget that I need this. Because I'm not performing all the time, right? It's not like so it's easy to lose track that this happens, and then it sort of takes you over, and that's one of the great parts about getting older is I seem to have a greater capacity for awareness around these patterns in my life. But it's easy that in the moment you want a rescue, you want something to come in, and that's when we tend to rely upon the things that are maybe less healthy in terms of choices. That makes a lot of sense. I remember years ago I heard an interview. What's the guy? I think it was the band Cake, the lead singer of the band Cake, and he talked about like when they would do really big shows, like the deafening silence of coming back to his hotel room, like that you would be at the center, in a stadium, like at the center of this storm of energy and this crowd, and then you come back and it's like just you, and it's in there. They feel so opposite of each other, and I'm certainly not experiencing something like at that scale, but I do think, again, I think that what I am experiencing is very related to that. And it's also, though, related to anyone who is trying to figure out how to share their creativity with the world, because it's not that like I said, it's not this sort of like linear thing where like I'll give you an example of I worked with a woman who she just wanted to post videos of herself singing on TikTok, you know, and but it was a real big deal in her mind to do that. And so then afterward, while she was proud of herself, there is still like there's a come down from doing something just like that too. So it's not this conversation isn't just about being on big stages in front of big groups of people. It's any sort of expenditure of energy that feels outside of the realm of safety
Yeah.
that maybe you've experienced in the past.
Well, and especially to the point of like, I think about just like our culture and, internet culture and all of that. I mean, it really rewards the highlight reel, right?
Yeah,
It
yeah,
rewards the perfection. It rewards, the final product, but it never rewards, or even rarely do we see the sort of the underbelly of it, right? And
yeah.
of
People
course,
don't talk about it.
no, yeah, and so that's why it's so good that that you're talking about it and we're having this conversation, and hopefully people will see themselves in it a little bit. And I just wanted to go back to something that you shared, um, just about the singer from Cake and how he mentioned the kind of deafening silence of the difference between the two, being on stage and then being in the hotel. The capacity piece that we just talked about actually allows us as humans to be able to hold both of those with a little bit more flexibility, right?
Hmm.
So
Yeah.
it's less so much a like up and down, and it's more like it's like I'm on a wobble board, and I'm able to
Right.
notice that it's deafeningly silent, and then I'm also able to kind of recall that dopamine hit that I had when I was on stage,
Hmm.
or when I was singing on TikTok, or whatever it was, right? So that hopefully
Yeah.
that sort of helped kind of re-explain things to anyone who might be listening. Yeah.
Yeah, and I actually think that that aligns with like the Buddhist principle of equanimity. Like, the of course, from a physiological standpoint, like they are very different. Like your body's experiencing those two situations very differently, but ultimately, there is a balance to be found if you contextualize those experiences in the grand scheme of your life, or what it is to be a human, even if you want to get broader, and starting to, I was so in admiration of Alyssa Liu, the ice skater during the Olympics. I felt like she was just like a little Buddha on the ice, because that's kind of how she would talk about her experience. She's like, I just like skating, and if I fall, I like that too. And of course, she doesn't always love to fall, but it's the way in which she's contextualizing falling within the journey of being a skater. And I think that that sort of relates to what it is that you're saying, of like learning to be or gathering the capacity to be able to see the relationship of these two different things clearly.
Yeah. Holding both and.
Both and I just thought of one other like habit I have that I'm noticing also plays into this. I used to love, so social media used to be such a different game than it is, but it used to be back in the day, back in my day, as a very elder millennial, that you would go to an event and then either the night of or the next day you would post about it. And that post would get a lot of energy because it would be people like, oh, either they were there or they wished they could have been there. But it's funny now, the algorithm doesn't seem to reward that. Like if I were to post, generally you don't get much energy or attention around that. Maybe that's just me. Maybe someone else listening would be like, no, I do. But anyway, the reason I say that is because I recognize that that is me searching for that dopamine hit, and it's not coming in the ways that it used to. And that is also, so then you keep scrolling, or you keep like imagining other things that you would post, or it's sort of this endless cycle of searching for those good feels.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah, you really name something, and you keep going back to see if anyone else liked it or commented,
Yeah.
or and then
Over and
comes
over and
and
over.
then comes it's almost like exacerbating that low again because you're not getting the dopamine hit, right?
Totally.
Oh yeah, it's real. Yeah. So maybe the day after it's like a no social media rule or whatever,
Yes.
right? Like
Yeah.
adding that in and saying, okay, no, like this is actually really truly recovery time, you know?
Yeah.
And knowing what it is that triggers those low lows can be really, really helpful.
So what I'm hearing from you is there's work to be done in between these experiences, and that work is really what will expand your capacity to be able to handle these with a little bit more grace and a little bit more ease, especially toward yourself. And then in the midst of the experience, doing your best to set clear boundaries that will point you down a path toward just sustainable well-being. And it's super normal to have a come down.
Super normal.
Awesome.
Anyone listening, there's nothing wrong with you.
So I don't need to burn my whole career down and start over.
No, keep going. If you want to, keep going. Yeah.
Mm.
Awesome, awesome. All right, my friend, I really appreciate this. This is super helpful, and yeah, I would add to your list that it's really good to have people to talk to that can empathize or sympathize with your experience, and the closest people in your life are great to have on standby in those days after big big moments, to just remind yourself that ultimately, the thing that's most important are the people that you love and the relationships that you have. So
Yeah. Hang out with people that get it for sure.
sure. All right, appreciate you.
Yes, appreciate you too.
Okay, isn't Elise the best? What a great friend to have. You can find more about Elise's work at elisebessler.com. She's a voice empowerment coach. She's a somatic experiencing practitioner, obviously a nervous system specialist, and super awesome person and good friend. And so I'm so grateful to have that conversation. Um, I'm sure you can relate to what it is that I'm describing. And hopefully, just by sharing that with you, it sort of normalizes it for all of us. And yeah, this is part of the gig. Like, this is part of what it is to be a creator and a performer and share yourself with the world. And it's worth it. You know, what we talked about, the dopamine hits, the adrenaline, the cortisol, the stress of performing, it's all worth it. It feels amazing. But there is a natural come down that would happen afterward. And the more gracious you can be with yourself throughout that experience, the better for you and for everyone around you. And I love the idea of setting up just clearer boundaries for myself. Someone once talked to me about sort of ritualizing the day after a performance, and that's something I want to lean more heavily into. So maybe I'll be able to report back to you shortly on some of the changes that I'll potentially make in that arena. But anyway, I love you all. Appreciate you all. Thank you for hanging out with me. Hopefully, this is helpful. Learn more about what I'm up to at davinyoungs.com. Check me out on Instagram at Davin Youngs, and you can find a video version of this podcast at becomingsound.substack.com or at my YouTube channel, Davin Youngs. Until next time, peace.